It's been a few weeks since I made one of these, and I promised myself whenever I put out my next review, I would finally confess to you all that bustin' makes me feel good. Welcome back, film family. Thank you for joining me to bust some ghosts as the Spangler family returns to the iconic New York City firehouse to team up with the original Ghostbusters, who've developed a top secret research lab to take busting ghosts to the next level. But when the discovery of an ancient artifact unleashes an evil force, Ghostbusters new and old must join forces to protect their home and save the world from a second ice age. In a film that so unashamedly leans into the style, the charm, the tropes of the original, committing to giving OG fans a good time in an overall harmless, enjoyable movie. This is an important frame of reference because I've never been a Ghostbusters fan up until Ghostbusters Afterlife. The original was never a part of my childhood. I only watched it in preparation for the much maligned 2016 remake reboot, and I found myself indifferent to both of those. And right now, I feel about Frozen Empire the same way so many Ghostbusters fans feel about Ghostbusters 2. An enjoyable, harmless movie that just doesn't quite live up to its clearly superior predecessor. That's Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, where in many ways, so many of the risks it takes, so many of its more bold, creative ideas work in broad strokes, but the details of how this story come together just shift the focus to not as effective character arcs, not as compelling story points. It feels overall like something's lacking. There's a magic that just isn't there as much as the film leans into the kind of stories that would be told in the animated Ghostbusters series. Again, which I have never watched. But even in this incredibly serviceable sequel, there are a lot of elements to love. Big laughs, gadgets, new spooky specters, ghosts, creatures, the great charismatic cast all return, and for the first time in the franchise, expansion on the lore, which is what I had been missing. It feels like this movie dives deeper and harder into expanding the mythology. We're done with Gozer. We've done that. We've revisited that. Even in the remake, now it's time for a new villain and one of my favorites that gives us legitimate frights, legitimate chills. No pun intended because it's cold, but it's a creepy villain that feels overwhelmingly powerful for all the Ghostbusters. And with all the charismatic cast around, when you have the new cast meeting the OG, working together throughout the whole film, there's a lot that you can mine from that story-wise. And the film does try to do as much as it can because it is so overbloated with characters. And I do appreciate the risks the film takes, introducing all these new elements, but it just doesn't work. The villain is fantastic. The build-up around the villain is fantastic. But where in Afterlife you had compelling, emotional family drama dynamics, that is not entirely stripped away, but is put in a background. In the foreground, the main takeaways from the film are that it has this more Saturday morning cartoony vibe, which is fun, but it doesn't balance well with the rest. On its ideas, in concept, you have Paul Rudd trying to become a father to these two kids. You have Carrie Coon trying to balance being a mother, having this new relationship, working with her kids, being a Ghostbuster, accepting her father's legacy. McKenna Grace's Phoebe is struggling to feel like she belongs, not just within her professional Ghostbusters unit, but even just amongst her family. And on principle, that can sound like the exact same thing she went through in Afterlife, but it's handled very differently and very effectively. Ernie Hudson is basically the Nick Fury now of the Ghostbusters world. Every single one of them brings such charm and charisma to the movie. Even cast members I will talk about more in my negatives and more in the issues I have with the film. Everyone does a good job. Everyone brings just that sparkle that you expect and want from them being in a Ghostbusters movie. Especially Paul Rudd. He has some of the best one-liners in the entire franchise. I had big laughs in this film, even when I was struggling to connect with the way they were telling the story. And it's not like it's a film that is lazy, that just tries to retread the same territory. If anything, this film fails for being too overly ambitious, for having too many ideas, for having too many characters. And a lot of those characters being here are exactly what makes this film struggle. There's just so much going on. There's so many subplots with so many characters. The film does not have time to flesh any of those ideas out. So when you get certain payoffs at the end of the film, they ring hollow because the film did not spend enough time on each of these plot lines. Bill Murray showed up to collect a check. Finn Wolfhard doesn't really have a ton to do. He plays around with Slimer a lot, and that's it. It's wonderful to see Slimer. Dan Aykroyd has a great side story here with Phoebe and Podcast, who again has nothing to do here, meeting Patton Oswalt. Because you go off on all these tangents, all these characters are each of them going in their own direction. The film just cannot catch up, and so it's constantly trying to catch up in between story beats, in between big set pieces. When you get to those set pieces, they worked because the director is actually a horror director. This is the director of Monster House. So when the film starts immediately with an action set piece chasing a ghost throughout the streets of New York, and every set piece following that up until the climax, all of them are fantastic. You have legitimate frights, you have spooky fun in there. It feels very welcoming for kids to try their first horror, as I feel all the Ghostbusters movies should. It's just in between all those ideas that the film crumbles under the weight of its own ambition. There's this ghost in the film that Phoebe bonds with, and there are so many interesting ideas in there. By the time you get to payoff, you have more questions than answers. You're wondering where the film was going with that, and was it sure about going in that direction, because it doesn't feel like it. And it doesn't feel like it's sure of itself in all of these storylines. That is a problem. Celeste O'Connor's Lucky is another one. I'm still trying to catch up on characters where she was basically one of the main Ghostbusters, one of the mainstays of the new team in Afterlife, and she's here serving a function, but you could have just placed her functionality onto James Acaster's character, or even flip it around. Have her be a more meaty character, a more important character to the story. Kumail Nanjiani is wonderful. He's funny. He's basically playing the same character he played in Obi-Wan, but now he's in Ghostbusters. He brings an element to the story, to the universe, really, that I don't know how good of a fit it is with the Ghostbusters lore, but since we are expanding the lore, I appreciate the risk taking. I appreciate trying new things. I don't know how it fits. So if you're a hardcore Ghostbusters fan, you'll have to tell me. And it's just so frustrating to talk about a movie like this because on so many levels, there's so much to love here, from the cast to the set pieces, the balancing of tone with horror and humor, its creative ideas, how it brings them all together, how it marries all these plot threads that are dangling, how they all converge. That is not satisfying, sadly. Not to say this is a bad Ghostbusters movie, not to say this is a bad movie. I enjoyed it. This is the second Ghostbusters movie I enjoyed. But like I said in my Out of the Theater reaction yesterday, at this point it feels like I'm just not wired to be a traditional Ghostbusters fan. A lot of what has made me gravitate towards this franchise in recent years are a lot of the issues that longtime fans have with this franchise. So I would love to learn what you thought of Ghostbusters franchise. And with all my thoughts out of the way, it's time for you to start the conversation about it in the comments below. What is your favorite Ghostbusters movie? Your least favorite Ghostbusters movie? Are you excited for Frozen Empire? Anything and everything down there. And if you're enjoying this review, want to see more videos like it from me and talk more movies and TV, this is the place to be. Consider clicking that subscribe button and you won't miss any future conversations on your favorite movies and TV. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire ditches the emotional depth of Afterlife for lore, world building, and memorable action set pieces. But this ultimately busts its underdeveloped story and character arcs into a struggling juggling act of subplots that never fully catches up with itself. I'm giving Ghostbusters Frozen Empire a B-. Thank you so much for watching, Film Family. Remember to start the conversation about Ghostbusters Frozen Empire in the comments below. I cannot wait to discuss with you. Big shout out to my channel members for always supporting the channel, and I'll be back very soon in more videos. So until the next one, love each other and love the movies.